Good afternoon, Southern California. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live right now, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Stocks finishing mostly higher today, getting a big boost from Apple, as Apple has hit a record high today for the first time since December. Investors also looking ahead to the next reading on consumer prices, on inflation that we'll be getting first thing tomorrow morning, an hour ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street. And then also tomorrow's a Fed Day. The Federal Reserve's policy announcement will be happening at 11 o'clock our time here in Los Angeles, followed by a full-blown news conference from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. So the markets will be glued to that, of course. The S&P 500 up 14 points, good enough for a record high close for that broadly based index at 5,375. The NASDAQ popping 151 points higher, extending its winning streak, closing at a record high 17,343. The Dow, though, down 121 points, down to 38,747. Tech stocks leading the gains today. Apple jumping more than 7%, hitting its first record high close since December. It was also the largest daily percentage increase since November of 2022. Apple stock at more than $14 today to $207.15, blowing past 200, selling at $207.15, a jump of 7%. The Fed starting a two-day policy-setting meeting today. It's widely expected they will be holding the line on the short-term interest rates at two-decade highs when they wrap up that meeting tomorrow. Investors, of course, will be watching closely for any new clues in the statement on the timing of what's expected to be the first rate cut in 4 years, possibly later this year. A lot depends, of course, on the inflation reading, which we'll also be getting tomorrow. The May Consumer Price Index report will be released tomorrow morning. The CPI forecast to rise 0.1% in May, according to economists talking to the Wall Street Journal. And the core rate of inflation, which takes out food and energy, is expected to climb 0.3% in May for the second month in a row. Of course, inflation is still running hotter than where the Fed wants it. Watching what's happening in the bond market, we see the yield in the 10-year note pulling back to 4.40%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates. Taking a closer look at Apple. Apple experiencing a big surge today, which added about $215 billion to the company's market cap, by the way. NVIDIA, which has been overshadowing Apple lately, pulling back today, down to 87 cents to 120.91. Yep, as in case you hadn't heard, NVIDIA had that 10-for-1 stock split, so now trading at $120 and change. Oracle also bursting on the scene this afternoon, shooting more than 9% higher in after-hours trading after Oracle delivered upbeat guidance that seemed to overshadow an earnings miss for the latest quarter. In the business of show business, we're watching shares of Paramount Global sliding today following reports that Sherry Redstone's National Amusements, Paramount controlling company, had ended merger talks between the media and entertainment giant and David Ellison's Skydance Media. Paramount Global shares down nearly $1 to 11 and change. We're following the latest developments in the Middle East and closer to home at UCLA, where at least 25 protesters were arrested after a pro-Palestinian encampment was set up there. Anti-Israel protesters set up a new encampment at UCLA, clashed with police. We'll talk about that, as well as the recent rescue of Israeli hostages this week and of course, the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it with one of the most prominent religious leaders in the world, Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associate Dean and Director of Global Social Action at the Simon Wiesenthal Center in West Los Angeles. More dramatic crime reports in the Los Angeles area, including attacks on businesses, looters breaking into an AutoZone store in South L.A. One person was arrested. I'll discuss what's happening with the Honorable Dennis Zine, former L.A. City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, and current LAPD reserve officer with something like 56 years of service to the City of Angels. The Honorable Dennis Zine will be on the line later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, the Fed, inflation, crypto too, the whole works. Joining us live now, the one and only John NAJARIAN, co-founder of Market Rebellion, financial commentator on the major networks and leading contributor on this program for decades, author of numerous books with his brother Pete. His latest, It's Not an Option. John NAJARIAN, welcome back to Mottek On Money here in Los Angeles and 790 KBC.
It's always not an option to miss the Frank Mottek show.
That is good to hear. That is very good to hear, John NAJARIAN. Elated to have you back.
Well, it's my pleasure. And certainly I'm one of the guys that does listen, whether I'm in Chicago, New York, or right now in Puerto Rico. But I love listening to you online with the podcasts and so forth, Frank, and you do a tremendous job. So delighted to be back with you, sir.
Thank you very much, John NAJARIAN. It's been a while since we've chatted behind live microphones. I don't think we've talked since Bitcoin hit a record high this year, and of course the markets have been on a roll lately. Give us your view of things here at the moment.
Well, the markets are certainly doing exactly what you said throughout the broadcast this afternoon, and that is that they're climbing that wall of worry. We do have some worrisome things going on. Some of the elections over in Europe were worrisome to those economies, and yet the United States just kept right on chugging. Things that happen with gold, with energy, with Bitcoin, the market just shrugs all of that off and instead focuses primarily these days on either AI, which to some people means artificial intelligence. To Tim Cook over at Apple, it means Apple intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. And they just had their worldwide developers conference. They announced a lot of interesting things at that conference. Their new operating system number 18 being announced. And I think they're going to have perhaps the mother of all upgrades coming, because the ChatGPT integration into Siri will really only work with the iPhone 15 and above. So I think that could cause a lot of folks that otherwise might say, the iPhone seems like it's about the same, a little bit better camera and so forth. But if it's got the operating system upgrade as well as the access to ChatGPT number 4, I think a lot of people, Frank, are going to be moving in that direction. And that's why Apple hit nearly $3.2 trillion today, a record high.
On the air live with John NAJARIAN, and thanks for focusing on Apple here at a record high close today at 207.15, a jump of 7%. A day after this developers conference, in which the stock tanked yesterday, which saw a surprising drop the day of that conference, which was unusual to see for Apple. Where do you think Apple goes from here?
Well, ahead of, we're probably, I'd say, somewhere between 30 days and maybe 45 days away from the leaks that always come before their September release of a new iPhone. And it's not just an iPhone, perhaps. There are upgrades to iPads and things like that, even the watch, that come at that September event. Now, that's not on the books yet, but I believe it will be shortly. And I think that is one of the things that continues to lift the stock. So am I surprised to see that a lot of institutional players are betting that it's closer to $220 by the end of summer, even though we might get into those summer doldrums just in the next few weeks? No, I'm not surprised at all. But as big as the news has been for Apple, it was also very big for Affirm, which, it's one of those buy now, pay later situations, Frank. And that operator, Affirm, AFRM, is going to be part of the Apple ecosystem, allowing people to, when they're buying something with their iPhone, perhaps put it on a buy now, pay later rather than putting it onto a credit card. A lot of Americans have been doing that. Affirm is not the only company that does it, but the fact that they're now on Apple is extremely big for Affirm, and it's just part of the trillion-dollar play that is Apple these days.
All right. What about NVIDIA? Had that stock split this past week, and now trading at around 120 or so after hitting record highs. What about NVIDIA here?
Well, of course, that's the horse that everybody wants to bet on, and I don't blame them. It's certainly been a great ride this year, hundreds, plural, of percent returns for people who have been in that stock, and even more if you've been in it for several years. I don't think the ride is over there. I think there are better ways to play, even though the stock has, as you said, made that 10-for-1 split. I would favor a lot of the data centers, like Vertiv. I would favor a lot of electricity plays, because this is a very power-hungry device, these AI devices. Somewhere between 10 and 20 times the demand for power that a regular search that Frank Mottek or John Najarian might do through Google or other. If you ask ChatGPT or other AIs to go find that information for you, it is a lot more of a drain on power suppliers. So that's why I would favor natural gas, because it's instant on power, and we're heading into the summer months when people want that to cool their homes. I would also say many of the utilities, Frank, are going to be plays well into the next decade in terms of trying to meet that demand that these AI devices put upon the system.
On the Air Live with John Najarian, and along those lines, we saw in Germany the Greens saw a big defeat there, that political party, and in France, I think you even retweeted it, the Macron supporters gasp as they watch their pro-globalist party get destroyed in elections all across France, and obviously a lot of concern with what's happened, this push to EVs and all of that, and energy being a big component. What about all of that happening in Europe and the potential impact on the energy names that we've been talking about over the years? Oil also, by the way, moving higher again here, just shy of $80 a barrel.
Yeah, heading into the, more or less the peak of the summer driving season, some 3 weeks out for the 4th of July. But my gosh, I think there still are reasons to be bullish on energy, for those that I talked about in terms of electricity generation, for those that are able to provide battery backups and the like for these large power production facilities, whether they're solar, whether they're wind, or even geothermal. I think there's going to be continued demand.
America starts the day with America in the Morning.
Pending home sales numbers, they tanked in April, but there are
Hi, I'm John Trout, your host for the latest news, politics, entertainment, business, and weather.
High-octane action in the dust. A new film puts...
Our staff of correspondents provide a fast-paced look at the world with specialized reports from where news happens.
It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Amazon.
Concise, accurate, and fresh each day.
America in the Morning, the podcast, available wherever you listen.
In those places for sure. But yeah, you said accurately that there are a lot of folks concerned overseas. I think there are a lot of folks that are going to be surprised if they don't read those tea leaves and see the same thing coming here, Frank. It's not a political statement. It's not meant to be. But it's, I think, just a recognition that people are frustrated by the immigration policies. They're frustrated by continued spending on certain programs, especially programs that fund overseas activities of foreign armies and walls being built in other lands, whereas a lot of Americans are wondering, well, what about us? And so I think, whether you want to view that as political or you just want to view it as consumers are likely to vote with their feet against those sorts of things, as they did in Germany, as they did in the Netherlands, as they did in France. If you don't recognize that, I think you're on the wrong side of the ledger.
Pendulum seems to be swinging the other way now. This conversation is flying by, so I definitely want to talk to you about crypto here, given the big run we've seen with Bitcoin and now expectations that Ethereum too will have its ETFs and all that. Give us an update now on what you see happening in the crypto world.
Well, we had that soft move in crypto today where it was down some 4 to 5%, the big one that is, Bitcoin. Ethereum followed suit. And the reason was it was the first time since the end of May, really, that we'd seen moves to the downside by some of these, the money flows in these crypto ETFs. In other words, some people that perhaps had got in right after the listing of those ETFs, exchange-traded funds, were taking some of that money off the table. It wasn't a huge amount. It was like $70 million or so in a single session. But the fact that that was the first time that those ETFs had seen that drawdown since May 23rd I think that's why some people said, well, might not be such a bad time to take a little money off the table. It's, in my mind, far from over, the run out of Bitcoin, I mean, but I don't think trees grow to the sky. I think we generally see a little bit of pullbacks here and there. We saw one into the 55 or 58 thousand per Bitcoin in US dollars just a month or so ago, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see similar sorts of moves to the downside before it back and fills and goes to the upside yet again.
All right, and for those who really want action, what about those meme coins or anything else that's getting your attention?
Well, I do pay attention to some of those meme coins. There's, I'll have to join you next week when there'll be a few more of them hitting the market, because a lot of these conferences, like the conference, the Bitcoin conference that just finished up last weekend in Austin, Texas, that's one of the biggest ones of the year. So I imagine we'll see a lot of new coins hitting the market, and depending on who the people behind it are and what the ecosystem is that they serve, I think we'll see a lot more of that in the next week or two. So perhaps I'll need to come back on your show then.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully also we'll get to see you out here in Los Angeles again. And whenever that happens, we'll have you right here in the studio. And, of course, you are the options expert as well. And the book, It's Not an Option, getting a lot of attention, too. What's the update on the option world here?
Well, and thank you for that. That book, people can still claim it if they go to itsnotanoption.com, completely free, the book and the shipping. Itsnotanoption.com. But knock on wood, we're the number one selling business book right now. We've sold over 68,000 of those books over the past, I think, 3.5 months. And I think the fact that options themselves are now trading about 50 million contracts per day, a massive increase just in the last 24 months of option trading, means that people are looking for more ways to hedge, more ways to generate returns, and to get a leveraged return on the monies that they want to invest. So I'm definitely drinking that Kool-Aid, but I have been for the last 43 years, Frank.
Right, I know that. Well, you're number one with us, John, always. Thank you very much for taking the call here. Great to have you back on the air, and hopefully get to do this more often now. John NAJARIAN, co-founder Market Rebellion, financial commentator on the major financial networks, leading contributor, of course, on this program for decades, author of numerous books. Say hi to Pete for us. The latest book is It's Not an Option. John, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Of course. Thank you, Frank. Talk to you soon, sir.
Yes, thank you very, very much. John NAJARIAN, live with us here. Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Friends, people like you and me have our ear to the ground on all things business. We like to be informed and indeed well prepared. As important as finance is, I want you to have a plan in case you are hit by someone not paying attention to the road. Thinking ahead serves us well, and even still we can get caught off guard as people are so focused on their destination that they might not have a plan if they're in an accident that's not their fault. That's why I encourage you to put my friend Attorney Clark Fielding's number in your phone. That number is 833-88-SHARK. So if you're in an accident, you'll be ready with your strategy to make Clark Fielding your very first call. Fielding Law aims for the highest possible settlements, considering you might need long-term care, rehab, compensation for lost wages, and any ongoing physical or emotional pain. So if you're hurt in any kind of accident, call for a free consultation with Fielding Law. You can trust them. They're honest, respected, and your strategy in case you get into that unexpected accident. Motorcycle, truck, pedestrian, scooter, hit and run, boating, bike accidents, roach coach, as we just heard. You name it. The number to call, 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK. Or go to ClarkTheSharkLaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes ZZ Top, coming to the Bank of America Performing Arts Center October 29th. Tickets are on sale Friday at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you are caller number 9, furnished by Nederlander Concerts. Call now. Caller 9 wins, 1-888-790-5222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Both the S&P 500 and NASDAQ got legs today, hitting record highs. The S&P 500 of 14 points, a record high close, 5,375. The NASDAQ of 151. to a new high at 17,343. The Dow, though, pulling back. Blue chips on the decline today, down 121 points at 38,747. Apple, the star of the day, hitting an all-time high of $14.03 to $207.15 a share, a pop of 7%. NVIDIA down 87 cents at $120.91. This after the NVIDIA stock 10-for-1 stock split recently. The price of oil edging higher, just above $78 a barrel now in New York. Gold up more than $7 at $2,333.80 an ounce. Silver up 16 cents at $29.39 an ounce. Shares of Paramount Global down nearly $1 at $11.04. The yield in the 10-year note, which impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, now at 4.40%. Bitcoin pulling back today, right now at $67,375. Ethereum was up slightly today, and right now, let's pull up Ethereum, is up about $10 at $3,496, and Doge has slipped to 14 cents. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KBC. More dramatic crime reports in the Los Angeles area, including attacks on businesses ongoing. Looters broke into an AutoZone store in South L.A. One person was arrested in that situation. At least 25 protesters were arrested on the UCLA campus after a pro-Palestinian encampment was set up. Anti-Israel protesters set up a new encampment at UCLA and clashed with police. They've now been ordered to stay away from the campus. Joining us live now, the Honorable Dennis Zine, former Los Angeles City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, current LAPD reserve officer, keeping track of everything that's happening out there. The Honorable Dennis Zine is on the line. Dennis Zine, thank you for the call here this afternoon, and give us your reaction, first of all, on the business front with this auto parts store being attacked.
Well, Frank, just another situation of lawlessness in the city of Los Angeles, state of California, where you have the street takeovers, and then that evolves into this entry, burglary, theft into the auto parts store, widely televised in Los Angeles media. And this is just one of the many situations where we see it on TV. But these situations are taking place constantly all over the city of Los Angeles. And people need to recognize when they see something like that, call 911. I know there'll probably be a delay, but at least call 911. They're breaking into stores. They have the iron bars. They have the roll downs. It doesn't seem to matter. They break in these stores and they loot the place, and then they take off. So the owner of that is going to suffer great loss. The insurance company gets involved. Insurance rates go up. It's just a continuing trend, and it doesn't seem to stop. It just continues over and over. I want to give the listeners two websites to look in your particular neighborhood. If you want to know what crime is taking place in your particular neighborhood, go to crimemapping.com, crimemapping, one word, .com. That'll give you an information on your particular address, zip code, and what type of crimes are reported. And I emphasize reported. Many people are victims of crime. They never report it. You need to report every single crime where you're a victim of the crime. There's also lapdonline.org, and that's another situation where you can actually find out your particular neighborhood, what type of crime is happening. Is it grand theft auto? Is it home break-ins, 459 burglary, 44 theft, whatever the case may be? Those are two websites that I encourage people to look at to know exactly what's happening in your particular neighborhood, on your particular block within the region of Los Angeles. It's something very important. But as we see on television over and over, these crimes continue. We now have the escalation of problems at the campus at UCLA. We know that happened recently. It's happening again. And a lot of the folks who are out there causing these problems are not students. They're professional agitators that are out there creating this friction. And we know many people want to graduate, big ceremony, and it's going to be impeded by this situation where the lawlessness takes place on the university campus. Not a good thing for the people of UCLA and the students and the families that want to enjoy that celebration, their accomplishments with the educational system. So it's very sad, but again, it continues as we see another day, more problems, more crime, more violence in the city of Los Angeles.
On the line with the Honorable Dennis Zine, and at least 25 protesters were arrested in that latest UCLA clash there. So arrests are being made there. In the case of the AutoZone situation, there was a report of one person arrested. I'm not sure what happened to that person, but at least one person was arrested there. We had just talked to Tracy Hernandez from Los Angeles Business Federation, LA BizFed, and certainly retail theft is a big issue. They were up in Sacramento discussing all of this. What's it going to take to turn the situation around here to address the retail theft especially?
Two main factors. Gascon needs to leave as a district attorney of LA County. With Gascon as a district attorney, you're not going to find any reduction or any type of incarceration.
Are you into weird, spooky, and strange history? Horrifying History tells you about the side of history that people don't normally talk about. We tell the tales of haunted places, infamous true crimes, unsolved mysteries, the paranormal, and then we look to history to see where the truth actually lies. Want to get spooky with us?
Horrifying History, part of the Believe Network. Just search BLEAV on YouTube or wherever you listen.
To eliminate some of those problems. So Gascon, number one, needs to leave. We need to remove him from office as a district attorney of LA County. Secondly, the proposition that they passed that permit people to commit these crimes and not suffer any consequences, those laws in California have to be passed to change, to modify, to go back to the basics. You commit a crime, there's consequences. It's not $950. You steal something for $50, $100, $400, whatever the case may be. You're stealing, there's consequences, not a slap on the wrist if you do get caught. There's no incarceration, there's no penalty, and it has really turned the retail industry into a way of simply stealing whatever you want, whenever you want, and no consequences. Those are the two main issues that need to be changed in California. Hopefully the voters will do that in November. If not, we're going to continue this trend, and a lot of people are saying, I'm done with California, I'm done with Los Angeles.
And what about this effort to reform Prop 47? I don't know if you saw the report that said California Democrats are playing dirty tricks in response to bipartisan efforts to place a measure to reform Prop 47 on the November ballot in favor of other public safety bills. Prop 47, as many of our listeners know, was that voter-approved initiative passed back in 2014, which loosened the penalties for drug and theft crimes here in California, has been blamed for the rampant retail theft problems. What about what's happening there in Sacramento?
Well, hopefully the legislators and the governor will have the courage to do what's right and to say we need to come back to basics. If you commit a crime, there's consequences. But this deal where you commit a crime, no consequences, no problems, no retail stores are intimidated. They're afraid oftentimes to make an arrest. They don't have the funds to hire security. But those laws have to change. That is the beginning of what we see and we're living with now, and the retail stores have been suffering over and over. Until those laws are changed, we're going to continue the same trend. They must be changed, and the voters can change that when it comes up in November.
Anything else that has caught your attention lately? Of course, these horrific attacks in Venice getting new attention with that court hearing today, and we just had someone who represents the Venice beach area on the air and described the crime and homeless situation there, which is very sad. If you keep going down the coast to some of the other cities in the South Bay, you see a big difference, and certainly leadership plays an important role in all that. At Manhattan Beach and all, it's hard to believe what you see there at Venice Beach. People from all over the world want to go there and want to enjoy the area, and it's certainly a very expensive area of beachfront property, and you've got it, the homeless encampments and the crime running rampant in the area.
Absolutely. So you go down there, your car gets broken into, and you get mugged. Not uncommon. Your car gets broken into because you're parked on a parking street, or on a public street, and your car gets broken into. Whatever's in the car visible, and I recommend hide everything in the trunk so people can't see it. But that's commonplace. And then the robberies that take place, we know the tragedy where the lady ended up dying because she was attacked. And those type of situations occur. Again, LAPD and the Sheriff's Department, your law enforcement agencies are under-equipped with personnel. They do not have adequate personnel to provide the safety that you deserve. That's one of the huge issues. And the second one is if someone does get arrested, you've got a district attorney, George Gascon, who doesn't believe in prosecution or incarceration. So what we have is two factors: lack of law enforcement personnel to do the job, and a district attorney doesn't want to do the job of prosecution, those that commit crimes, serious crimes that affect people's lifestyles and their quality of neighborhood. Those are the key issues that need to be modified, clearly, to make it better for everyone.
All right, and of course, in November, Gascon will be facing a challenge by veteran prosecutor Nathan Hochman, so that is going to be a big story in November when voters go to the polls on that one. The Honorable Dennis Zine, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank, and I hope everyone's safe.
Yes, indeed. We appreciate it. The Honorable Dennis Zine, former L.A. City Council member, former LAPD Sergeant, and current LAPD Reserve Officer. Dennis Zine on the line here on Mottek On Money, 790 KABC. Here in 790 KBC, we're following the latest developments in the Middle East. Israel says Hamas has rejected the latest hostage and ceasefire deal proposal. This after the dramatic rescue of some Israeli hostages this week. We're also watching what's happening at UCLA, where another clash involving Palestinian protesters. 25 pro-Palestinian protesters were arrested at UCLA in order to stay away from the campus. Following all of these developments very closely with us is Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associate Dean and Director of Global Social Action at the Simon Wiesenthal Center in West Los Angeles. Rabbi Cooper, thank you very much for coming to the line and give us your reaction to these latest developments.
Well, thank you, Frank. Of course, the initial reaction that 4 Israeli hostages were somehow rescued from that hell gave Israel and the Jewish people a tremendous boost. Now, as we learn more about how much they suffered with malnutrition and other horrors that we won't talk about in an open line, nonetheless, it gives a glimmer of hope and of light for Israel and for the Jewish people and for her allies and supporters. But what I find particularly disturbing and even shocking is you have all these voices basically saying that Israel shouldn't have done it. A BBC reporter asked an Israeli for a military person, didn't you have the moral responsibility to let the local population know that you were coming? Of course, if Israel had done it, those 4 hostages would have been murdered on the spot. So there is really a lack of moral clarity. That is a victory for the pro-Hamas global campaign. And we see things right on the streets of our own city. The UCLA situation is still out of control. The people who run UCLA, the administration, has not done the job it needs to do. And there's still fundamentally a lack of accountability in terms of protesters who, remember, this is not 2 sides of an issue. These are protesters, organized protesters who want to see an end to the Jewish state, who are essentially repeating the Hamas narrative at every opportunity, and are being coddled in many of the campuses, and we see the results on the streets of our own city. Just last Saturday, there was a huge pro-Hamas demonstration outside the White House where they called for the death of Jews. Synagogues targeted in Canada. The former head of Human Rights Watch accused Israel of crimes against humanity because some of the Israeli operatives were dressed as Arabs. If it wasn't so tragic, it would be laughable. Inside of Israel, the 2 of the main centrists have now left the coalition government. I don't know if that means they're going to be early elections or not. But throughout, you have this stoic, focused bravery of the people of Israel. And you have a sense that the clock is ticking on the northern border in terms of an all-out war, God forbid, with Hezbollah, with the losers automatically being the civilian populations of northern Israel and of southern Lebanon. But essentially, Hezbollah has been able to set a good part of northern Israel on fire. It has killed innocent people. Israel has retaliated with targeted strikes on some of the military leaders. But at the end of the day, all of this comes right back to Tehran, to the Ayatollah, who unleashed this series of events in order to detour and hope, from his point of view, hopefully kill the anticipated peace deal between Saudi Arabia and the Jewish state. I think those fundamentals are still waiting in the wings. And in the meantime, innocent people are suffering. But I think that the Palestinians need to look in the mirror when we find out that the girl hostage was being held by someone who was an Al Jazeera journalist while also being a member of Hamas. And his father was a medical doctor and also a faith leader in Gaza. You can have it both ways, to claim to be innocent bystanders, civilians, on the one hand, and on the other hand, aiding and abetting Hamas by essentially hiding and enslaving innocent Israeli hostages in your own home.
That is outrageous. On the air live with Rabbi Abraham Cooper. And let's not forget what started this war. It was the Hamas terror attack on Israel back on October 7th. And as far as the news coverage of all of this, we've been hearing pretty much all about Israeli action. But, of course, Israel remains under attack with rockets and so forth, and we rarely hear about that.
Well, I also think that when in speaking to some of the local elected officials here in California and New York, some of them just don't get it. They can't wrap their minds around the fact that the Jewish community, the largest one being in New York, we're the third largest Jewish community in the United States, we don't feel safe. Yesterday in Manhattan, there was an exhibition in honoring memory of the victims of the Nova Music Festival, and a pro-Hamas mob gathered outside, essentially making it impossible for the people inside to leave. It reminds me of the early days of this conflict when we had pro-Hamas protesters in front of our institution, when we showed 43 minutes of footage from October 7th, most of which that had been taken by Hamas operatives themselves in terms of the killings of entire families, the murders and the rapes. So there is a disconnect, and there is a deep sense of concern in the Jewish community. And I think that also has an impact, for example, on how we're looking not so much at which candidate is going to be selected to be the next police chief, for example, in LA, but more importantly is, will that person have the bandwidth to be able to swim against the tide of this weird and dangerous and pernicious narrative right now that has taken hold of many of the campuses, very often much of the mainstream media, on social media, that demonizes the victim and holds up the victimizer as someone who is worthy of support. So whoever the next police chief is going to be, and here in LA and across the country, the various police chiefs, they also are going to have to deal with the fact that in a certain way, the Hamas narrative has made tremendous inroads to the extent that, as you said, people forgot how this whole thing started. An invasion by terrorists into a sovereign country, and we know everything else that's happened in terms of murder, mayhem, rape, and kidnappings. And here we are 8 months later still talking about over 100 hostages. It's a very...
All right, Cooper, we'll have to stop there. Wish we had more time, but thank you very much for that comprehensive update and for all those important points. I hope to speak with you again very soon. Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associate Dean and Director of Global Social Action at the Simon Wiesenthal Center in West Los Angeles, live with us here this afternoon on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and we'll be doing more at 4 tomorrow right here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
When you have sports mixed with your pop culture, along with humor and celebrity interviews, your earbuds are enjoying The Rich Eisen Show. Women's basketball legend, Sue Bird.
Caitlin Clark, obviously, front and center for the WNBA season. What have you seen over the first couple of games for her?
Part of professional sports is you're going to have some stretches. You're going to shoot bad, your team's going to lose, and how do you respond to that? Everybody's clearly got their defensive game plan built around her, which is a compliment, but you got to figure it out from there.
Search for The Rich Eisen Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.